A history of drag. Drag, exaggerated gender expression often involving cross-dressing and performed in the context of entertainment, has been part of many cultures for thousands of years. It was born in response to religious misogyny and continued in that vein through the rise of theater. But once women were allowed on stage, drag lived on because it also serves many other important purposes, including self-expression and subverting traditional gender norms. Drag has been at the heart or on the fringes of every major development in entertainment, and it has had an outsized influence on fashion, language, and culture. So put on whatever makes you feel most fabulous, be it a decadent gown and wig, a bespoke tuxedo and tails, or something we've never seen before, as we sashay through the history of drag and meet many marvelous drag queens and kings along the way. A note on pronouns. As many people in the past did not have the same gender terminology we do today, I will, whenever possible, refer to people as they refer to themselves. Men dressing as women in theater dates back to the birth of theater itself. In ancient Greece, worshippers of Dionysus, the god of wine, fertility, and ecstasy, held annual religious festivals. As a statue of the god was carried into the city, his worshippers danced and sang about his greatness. In the 6th century BCE, an adherent named Thespis stepped out of the chorus and acted out the legend of Dionysus. Thespis is considered the first actor, and he gave us the term thespian. This new form of entertainment spread quickly, but most in the Dionysus cult were women, and the men in power feared that seeing the female form on stage would whip the audience into lustful madness. What's more, it was believed that a woman's place was in the home, her only ambitions, marriage and motherhood, concepts at odds with a career as an actress. So female characters were played by adolescent boys who didn't yet have beards and could more easily attain the ideals of feminine beauty. This practice of banning women and giving female roles to young men dominated the development of theater in the West for the next 2,000 years. In ancient China, women performed male roles from the 600s until they too were banned from theater in 1722. In medieval Europe, Christian ideals of female chastity continued to keep women off the stage. Morality plays based on biblical stories and the lives of saints were regularly performed by troupes of traveling actors made up entirely of men. In England, they were called mummers. Unlike the Greek and Romans, actors playing women's roles were not always going for feminine realness. Adult men with full beards wore oversized bosoms and gaudy makeup for comic effect. Characters like Buxom Nell, Dame Dolly, and Mrs. Clagged-Arse became fixtures of mummers' plays. This tradition has existed in British comedy ever since. Women first gained prominence on stage during the Italian Renaissance. The first recorded professional actress in Europe was Lucretia de Siena, who signed a contract with the theater Commedia dell'arte in 1564. Lucretia and other actresses also worked as courtesans, refined and well-educated sex workers who catered to noble and wealthy clients. If a woman couldn't marry well, sex work was virtually her only option for earning a living. Italian acting troupes toured throughout Europe, but they were not welcomed in England, where women continued to be banned from the stage for another century. English theater flourished in the 1500s thanks to the likes of William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Ben Jonson. Shakespeare's iconic female characters, including Juliet, Lady Macbeth, and Ophelia, were all played by adolescent boys in wigs, dresses, and makeup. Shakespeare used this convention to enrich the gender confusion in As You Like It, in which the character of Rosalind, a woman, played by a boy, dressed as a man. Ben Jonson did the same in Epic Queen, in which a man is conned into marrying a boy dressed as a woman. There is a legend that the word drag emerged in Shakespeare's time as an acronym for dress as a girl, but the term more likely came into use in the 1800s and refers to the way women's gowns drag across the stage. While cross-dressing was acceptable on stage, it was demonized in other contexts. Men were hanged if found guilty of engaging in homosexual activities, including cross-dressing. Women didn't suffer such penalties as authorities didn't believe female homosexuality existed. Mary Frith was assigned female when he was born in London in 1584, but as much as he was able to, he lived as a man. Mary wore a doublet and baggy breeches, smoked a pipe, and swore, activities considered acceptable only for men. He took to the stage, played the lute, and performed bawdy songs and bantered with the audience. But Mary was frequently severely punished, forced to do public penance in front of St. Paul's Cathedral, and temporarily locked up in Bedlam Hospital on charges of insanity. Mary eventually married a male friend, which shielded him from legal persecution. He survived to the age of 75. In 1628, women in Japan were banned from performing in kabuki theater. Their roles were taken by adolescent boys, known as wakashu. Kabuki's highly stylized nature with elaborate costumes and heavy makeup lent itself well to gender illusion, and the racy plays got spectators in the mood. Actors often engaged in sex work with both male and female clients. Brawls frequently broke out in the audience over the favors of popular actors. This led to the shogunate temporarily banning women's roles in kabuki altogether. But theater with no romance was pretty boring, so the ban didn't last. In 1673, women were once again allowed to perform on stage, but the tradition of drag in kabuki theater lives on today. Back in England, the growing Puritan movement was strongly against theater altogether. In 1642, in the midst of the Civil War, Parliament shuttered all the theaters. Puritans who thought the government wasn't strict enough set sail for America. By 1661, the people had gotten tired of the puritanical regime, and they invited Charles II to restore the monarchy. He had spent his youth in exile at the court of his cousin Louis XIV, and had seen many women perform on stage. So, when Charles reopened the theaters, he also lifted the ban on actresses. Now that women could tread the boards, there would never again be a need for men to dress in drag. But that didn't happen. Drag continued because it serves many other important purposes, including self-expression and subverting traditional gender norms. In fact, the stage door swung far the other way. During the Restoration, there was a vogue for women to wear men's clothes. Even ladies of the court, including Queen Catherine of Braganza, wore men's fashions and strutted around with walking sticks. On stage, actresses often took on male comic roles, particularly rakes and Lotharios. The character of Macheath in The Beggar's Opera was played by an actress. In 1732, England's first recorded drag queen, Princess Seraphina, entered the history books when she sued one Thomas Gordon for stealing her clothes at knife point. The case garnered great public interest. Gordon's defense was that Seraphina was gay. He outed her in court and exposed her as a sex worker in London's underground gay clubs, known as molly houses. At the time, the punishment was execution. Fortunately, Princess Seraphina was not prosecuted, but Gordon also got away with assaulting her. In 1869, in Harlem, New York, Hamilton Lodge began holding masquerade balls. Gay men and gender nonconforming people flocked to the secret gatherings, where they could express themselves freely and dance in satin and silk dresses. William Dorsey Swan was born into slavery in Maryland in 1860. In the 1880s, he organized underground drag balls in Washington, D.C. William's persona was the Queen of Drag, which is how the term drag queen was born. The queen performed dances like the cakewalk, which mimicked the mannerisms of plantation owners and would later evolve into voguing. His 30th birthday ball was raided by police, and the queen was arrested. He resisted and later petitioned President Grover Cleveland for a pardon, but was denied. William is considered one of the first gay rights activists. During the California Gold Rush, the Barbary Coast district of San Francisco was known for saloons such as The Dash, which featured attractive female impersonators. In Victorian England, a time famous for its sexual repression, drag still had an important role in popular music halls. It was considered too subversive to sexualize older women, so having them played by men as comic relief neutralized them. And in romantic plays, seeing young and good-looking men and women kissing was too risque, so leading men were often played by women in what were termed breeches roles. Superstar Sarah Bernhardt played Hamlet to much acclaim in 1899. Drag king Vesta Tilley became a star for her male impersonation. Young and vulnerable male roles were often played by women. There is a long tradition of casting a woman as Peter Pan. Even in 2014, an NBC broadcast starred Allison Williams. In 1870, the case of Fanny and Stella made headlines. They were arrested in drag while leaving a London theater and charged on conspiracy to commit buggery, which carried a maximum sentence of life with hard labor. Fanny and Stella were acquitted on lack of evidence, but authorities were so frustrated that they passed the 1885 Labouchere Amendment, which labeled all male homosexual activity as gross indecency. The act was used to prosecute thousands, including playwright Oscar Wilde and computer science pioneer Alan Turing. In 1930, King George V's son, Prince George, Duke of Kent, was arrested while in drag with his friend and possible lover, Noel Coward. But once the police realized they'd arrested a prince, the story was hushed up. Labouchere was finally overturned in 1967. In the U.S., vaudeville emerged as the leading form of entertainment. These variety shows featured short dramatic plays, comic sketches, singing, dancing, magicians, and a lot of drag. My great-grandmother, Florence Cooper, was a vaudevillian in the early 1900s. She and her sisters, Abby and Marie, performed as the Cooper sisters. From vaudeville emerged the first drag queen superstar, Julian Eltinge. He made his first appearance on Broadway in 1904. He ditched slapstick and impressed the audience with his realistic female impersonation. Julian became a fashion icon for women. He toured the US and Europe and gave a command performance to King Edward VII. In 1917, Hollywood beckoned, and Julian appeared in The Countess Charming and other films. In the early 20s, he was the highest-paid performer in America. At the time, Ivy League universities did not admit women, so their drama clubs, like Harvard's Hasty Pudding Theatricals, Princeton's Triangle Club, and Penn's Mask and Wig Club, routinely cast young men in slapstick female roles. These same upper-class men were scandalized by the emerging drag scene in New York City, where rouged queens like Princess Toto, Maggie Vickers, and Phoebe Pinafore danced the can-can to a ragtime piano at bars like The Slide. When Prohibition pushed liquor underground in 1920, drag went with it. LGBTQ culture thrived in big cities where police weren't interested in enforcing the unpopular law. During the pansy craze, bootlegged moonshine brought all kinds of people together in illegal speakeasies. Bert Savoy cut a large and brassy figure with her signature red wig and wide-brimmed hat. She and other drag queens were friend and inspiration to upcoming actress Mae West. Mae made it big in Hollywood with her husky voice and risque double entendres. She was an early activist for gay rights and would be an inspiration to drag performers for generations to come. White audiences flocked to Harlem's Jungle Alley to hear the hot new sound, jazz. Jazz brought drag and music together like never before. Langston Hughes described tourists purchasing box seats from which they looked down on the queerly assorted throngs on the dance floor, males in flowing gowns and feather headdresses, and females in tuxedos. Harlem drag focused on fashion, beauty, and realness. Drag king Gladys Bentley sang and danced in a white top hat and tails, backed by a chorus line of drag queens. The 1933 repeal of prohibition made it harder for queer people to meet in public. Because bars and clubs needed liquor licenses, the government was now free to create and enforce morality codes. Clubs were frequently raided by police, and people were arrested for wearing 3 or more items of clothing not associated with the sex on their ID. The party continued in Germany, where drag was a big part of Berlin's cabaret scene. German actress Marlene Dietrich made a splash in Hollywood, performing as both a man and a woman. In 1933, the musical comedy Victor und Victoria, about a woman pretending to be a female impersonator, was a hit. Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld opened the Institute of Sex Research in Berlin, and transgender people with means came from around the world for his cutting-edge hormone therapies. But when the Nazis came into power, the institute was destroyed, and thousands of LGBTQ people were murdered in concentration camps. But drag endured and flourished where it could. In the 30s and 40s, drag often focused on impersonating glamorous Hollywood stars like Elizabeth Taylor and Judy Garland, both of whom were in turn fans of drag and frequented Club 82 in downtown New York. Judy and her character Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz were iconic, and asking, "Are you a friend of Dorothy?" became a coded way to inquire if someone was gay. Many other forms of signaling, including ear piercing and color-coded handkerchiefs, emerged to help queer people communicate under the suspicious gaze of the law. After World War II, heteronormative culture intensified. Some in the U.S. government feared that homosexuals were more likely to be communists. During the Lavender Scare, thousands were fired from government jobs, and queer culture was forced deeper in the closet. In Hollywood, performers including Rock Hudson, Robert Taylor, Barbara Stanwyck, and probably many others had lavender marriages in order to hide their orientation. Exposure meant being blacklisted and never working again. Drag occasionally appeared in mainstream media, but was usually a punchline, as in 1959's Some Like It Hot, or vilified, as in 1960's Psycho. Some drag performers still managed to have successful careers. The Jewel Box Revue played Harlem's Apollo Theater and toured the country. One of its stars, Lynn Carter, recorded an album called She's a He and became the first drag artist to perform at Carnegie Hall. In 1968, 2 important films documented drag culture. The Queen followed the drama backstage at the Miss All-America Camp Beauty Contest in New York City, including Crystal LaBeijah's frustration that despite being just as beautiful and talented, she always lost out to white queens. The Andy Warhol joint, Flesh, introduced Jackie Curtis and Candy Darling, whom Lou Reed sang about in the 1972 song Walk on the Wild Side. Jackie Curtis created the Theater of the Ridiculous, which featured hyper-real, over-the-top comic drag performances. Police raids on gay bars continued. Officers frequently harassed and assaulted drag queens, even dunking their heads in mop buckets before hauling them off to jail. In the early morning of June 28, 1969, patrons at the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village fought back. Queen Marsha P. Johnson, King Stormy DuLaverie, and many others rioted for their right to exist. Thus, the gay liberation movement was born. On the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, the first gay pride marches were organized in New York, Chicago, LA, and San Francisco. Pride events have since spread around the world and are often celebrated in June. In the UK, drag never stopped being part of mainstream theater, though it was relegated to comic relief. Pantomime, performed at Christmas for Children, traditionally featured dames, played by men in drag, while principal boys like Prince Charming and Dick Whittington were played by women. Danny LaRue's celebrity impersonations made him one of Britain's highest-paid entertainers. Edna Everage burst on the scene in Australia in 1955 to poke fun at boring conservative suburbia. The character rose to international fame, and in 1974, Edna was awarded Commander of the British Empire, making her Dame Edna. In the 1970s, popular sketch comedy troupe Monty Python performed in drag regularly. In 1984, members of the band Queen dressed as characters from the popular British soap opera Coronation Street. For the music video, I Want to Break Free, singer Freddie Mercury was encouraged not to shave his mustache because it made the scene funnier. The video was a hit in the UK, but American audiences considered it offensive and it was banned. David Bowie had better luck with androgynous glam rock, which was heavily influenced by, but not actually categorized as drag. In the US, drag flourished in alternative culture. Performers in San Francisco were influenced by the hippie movement. Glam and punk rockers like the New York Dolls, the Velvet Underground, and the Stooges were influenced by drag. Wayne County of the Electric Chairs transitioned and changed her name to Jane. In 1972, director John Waters made drag queen Divine a star in his midnight movie hit, Pink Flamingos. Divine went on to star in the 1988 comedy Hairspray and inspire Ursula in Disney's The Little Mermaid. The 1975 cult classic Rocky Horror Picture Show featured a glammed-up Tim Curry as Dr. Frankenfurter. The 1982 remake of Victor Victoria with superstar Julie Andrews won critical praise and Oscar nods. In the late 80s, early 90s, two distinct drag cultures emerged in New York City. In Uptown, the ballroom scene became a haven for Black and Latinx LGBTQ people who were tired of being passed over for awards at white-dominated pageants. Crystal LaBeija from The Queen became the mother of the House of LaBeija. The houses of Milan, Corey Extravaganza, and others gave support and a literal home to gay and trans youth, many of whom had been kicked out by their parents. Houses walked or competed together in categories, which emphasized beauty, high fashion, and realness. A distinct dance style called pop, dip, and spin based on breakdancing evolved into posing and voguing, named after the fashion magazine. Madonna's 1990 hit, Vogue, featured performers from the ballroom scene. Ballroom was documented in the 1990 film Paris is Burning. During the HIV crisis, the house system supported people through devastation and rising social stigma. The House of Latex was formed to promote safe sex education. Downtown, drag experienced a revival, influenced by punk rock. There, the style was gritty, thrift store, and focused on body comedy and lip-syncing to records. Charles Busch staged plays including Psycho Beach Party and Vampire Lesbians of Sodom. Drag queens including Linda Simpson, Hedda Lettuce, and Mistress Formica rose to fame. Drag kings, including Murray Hill and Mo B. Dick, strutted their stuff at Club Casanova. In 1984, Lady Bunny began Wigstock, an annual outdoor drag festival. One of Wigstock's regular performers was RuPaul Charles. He became drag's biggest star with the 1993 dance track, Supermodel You Better Work. Successful albums, a contract with MAC Cosmetics, and The RuPaul Show on VH1 followed. In the 90s, drag finally broke into the mainstream, with hit films The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, and The Birdcage, which featured more flattering and sympathetic portrayals of drag queens. British stand-up Eddie Izzard strutted the stage in heels and makeup and talked openly about identity and attraction. But men dressing as women was still frequently used as a punchline in hit movies like Tootsie and Mrs. Doubtfire, and popular TV shows including In Living Color, Martin, Saturday Night Live, Kids in the Hall, and Little Britain. Now that audiences have become more sophisticated about feminism and gender identity, there is a lot of debate about if these tropes are offensive to women and LGBTQ people. This punching down, comic relief style of drag, mostly performed by straight, cisgender men in a male-dominated industry, has largely fallen out of favor. Though Tyler Perry is still making Medea movies, which are criticized for perpetuating negative stereotypes about Black women. But drag as an expression of gender exploration and nonconformity, which comes from and empowers marginalized groups, is now more popular than ever. In 2009, RuPaul's Drag Race premiered. The reality competition series brought the best drag queens of America into living rooms across the world. In addition to highlighting their talents, it also humanized the performers and featured conversations about gender identity, HIV, mental health, and relationships. Drag Race is now in its 15th season and has launched spin-offs and numerous international versions. The show's popularity has had an immeasurable effect on the LGBTQ rights movement and helped many straight and cisgender people relate to the community and become allies. Drag Race has faced criticism on some fronts, including for not featuring drag kings, who still have far fewer opportunities in the entertainment industry. Drag Race contestants including Trixie Mattel, Bianca Del Rio, Shangela, Bob the Drag Queen, Jinx Monsoon, and so many others have shot to international fame with record deals, comedy specials, and live performances. Drag shows have become popular for people in all walks of life, and drag is now a bigger part of entertainment than it has ever been. More LGBTQ performers, writers, and producers are out than ever before, and as a result, positive queer representation in entertainment has skyrocketed. Drag has even revisited its roots, with all-female and non-binary troupes performing Shakespeare. But as always, there is backlash. In the US, bills targeting drag performances and transgender youth are on the rise. Media fearmongers have spread false information and incited vigilantes to show up at drag shows with guns and threaten performers and patrons. In 2022, 5 people were killed and 25 injured at a shooting at Club Q in Colorado Springs. That's why I'm donating profits from this video to the National Center for Transgender Equality. This organization tackles discrimination and advocates for changing the policies which are threatening the lives of LGBTQ youth. If you would like to join me in making a donation, please click on the link below the video. Drag has been an important part of history for thousands of years and will continue to be fabulous for eons to come. Now that I'm home from London, I've been thinking a lot about my next historic trip, and I'd love to bring you along with me so we can talk about history together in person. Perhaps we'll explore the picturesque castles of Germany or the rugged Scottish Highlands, or venture through ancient ruins in Greece or Istanbul. If you're interested in traveling with me in 2024, please take the survey linked in the description for more information and to help me decide where we'll go. I had to cut a lot of great information out of this episode, so if you want to learn more, check out the History Tea Time podcast for an uncut version of this episode. You can now follow History Tea Time on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching.